Hello and welcome back everyone. This is Ravi here, your Udemy instructor. Today I want to discuss a very important question on Microsoft Fabric that I really like because it looks straightforward, but there are actually several Fabric concepts hidden into this. So imagine I'm your interviewer and I ask, you have a central lakehouse, okay, containing enterprise sales data. Now there are three different teams. They need to consume this data, but you don't want to create multiple copies. At the same time, each team should only access the data they are authorized to see. So how would you design this in Microsoft Fabric? Take a few seconds. You can pause the video if you want and then think. Think about three things: OneLake, shortcuts and security. And now let's build the answer together. Okay, so let's start with the architecture first. Personally, I would first establish a central data owner workspace, and I will call it as our enterprise data workspace. Inside that workspace, I have my sales lakehouse. Maybe I will have a tables like customer, orders, product, and maybe sales transaction. This is our authoritative copy of the data. Now suppose I have three teams. The number one team is sales analytics, number two is finance analytics, and third one is operational analytics. What is the traditional approach? Let's copy the data into each workspace, but that's exactly what I want to avoid, because now I have three copies, three refresh processes, three places to manage, and potentially three places where security can go wrong. So instead, this is where OneLake shortcut become very interesting. Okay, you can see in this image also how I explained the different tables and how shortcuts can create a shared workspace. Now let's understand why shortcuts. Now again we'll pause here for a second and think about it. What exactly is shortcut? Think about a shortcut on your desktop, right? You haven't created another copy. It's just a shortcut to the original application. You are simply creating a reference that points somewhere else. OneLake shortcut works with a similar idea. Instead of physically copying the data into another location, the downstream workspace can reference the existing data. So if I'm asked in an interview, why should you use a shortcut instead of copying the data? The answer is simple: because I want to avoid unnecessary data duplication and reduce the need for additional ingestion and synchronization process. That's a much stronger answer than simply saying shortcuts are faster. Don't make unsupported performance claim in the interview. Okay, focus on reducing duplication and simplifying data access. Now here comes the difficult part, which is security. Now here is where I would expect the interviewer to dig deeper. They will probably ask, okay, so now you have created the shortcut, but how are you going to secure the data? This is where you should slow down. Don't immediately say I'll use workspace roles. No, that's not necessarily enough for this scenario. We need to think about data level access. For example, the sales team may need sales data, finance team may need finance data, and operational team may need the operational data. So I want to establish the appropriate OneLake security model around the data. The principle I would like you to remember is: own the data centrally, secure the data appropriately, and then consume it through shortcut. This gives a much cleaner enterprise architecture. Okay, so you may be asked about the follow-up question. Let's see some of the follow-up question on this topic. So here is the first follow-up question. If I create a shortcut to Lakehouse table, does that automatically give every user access to underlying data? Think about it. The answer is no. And this is very important point, because a shortcut is not the same thing as saying everyone now has unrestricted access. You still need to design the appropriate permission and authentication model. So whenever you talk about shortcut in the interview, immediately think shortcut plus permission plus authentication. That's the mental checklist. Now, the next one level deeper question could be pass-through versus delegated identity. The interviewer may ask, how does this shortcut authenticated to the target data? This is where you should know the difference between pass-through authentication and delegated identity. With pass-through authentication, the user identity is involved in accessing the target. So, the user permission matters. With delegate identity, a configured identity is used to access the target. And why it is important? Because your architecture design depend on the security requirement. For example, imagine that I have an external data source. I don't want to give every downstream user direct access to the external source. So, I need to carefully select the authentication approach. And this is the kind of detail that can turn a basic fabric answer to a senior level architect answer. So, let me give you some real interview situation. Okay, let's say interviewer ask, okay, so the user can see the shortcut but they cannot access the data. So how would you troubleshoot? So you don't need to panic. You need to go through systematically. First, I would check. Here your answer should be, first I would check, does the user have access to shortcut location? If yes, the second thing is, does the user or the configured identity have access to the target? And then the third question which you should ask, which authentication model is being used? And finally, you would check whether a more restrictive permission is blocking the access. This is how I recommend answering troubleshooting question in the interview. Okay, don't randomly list 10 things. Give the interviewer a logical troubleshooting sequence one by one. Okay, so let me give you another follow-up question which may come. Would you use workspace role alone to implement this security requirement? My answer would be not necessarily. Workspace roles control what user can do within a workspace, but our requirement is more specific. We are talking about who can access this particular data. So I would evaluate OneLake security and appropriate table or folder level permission depending on the scenario. And remember the golden rule, give the user what they need, not everything you have. That is called the least privilege model. Now let's put everything together. If I had to draw this architecture on a whiteboard during the interview, this is what I draw. At the top, I would draw a central data workspace. Inside it, I will have an enterprise lakehouse. Then that's where the data lives. Then I apply the appropriate security model, and downstream team consume the required data using the OneLake shortcut. Okay, so we are separating the data ownership from data consumption, and that's the architectural principle I want you to remember in the interview. Okay, so before we end up this video, let's see some final rapid fire question. You can pause and then answer and then go to the next question. So question 1 is, what is OneLake shortcut? Question 2 is, does a shortcut create another physical copy of data? Question 3, what is the difference between pass-through and delegated authentication? Question 4, if a user can see the shortcut but cannot read the data, what permission would you check? And finally, question 5, why would an enterprise prefer centralized data ownership with downstream consumption? If you can confidently answer all 5, you are already thinking beyond just the definition of the shortcut. Okay, you are now started thinking like a fabric solution architect. Okay, so I will see you in the next question, and I hope this short video help you to clear some of the doubt with the shortcut. So I will see you in the next one. Till then, goodbye.